than just being off from school or work. They also mean that you get to delight in a smorgasbord of cartoons, and you absolutely cannot miss your weekly feast. On her personal blog, author Sheila Motion recalled there was a ritualistic aspect of Saturday morning cartoon viewing that imbued it with a kind of sacred, devotional atmosphere. A ritualistic aspect of Saturday morning cartoon viewing that imbued it with a kind of sacred, devotional atmosphere.
Well, that came in loud and clear. That's awesome. I don't really know where I am. I'm assuming I'm over here at Magical Minecraft Miracles. Today, I wanted to. I was watching a show about cartoons Saturday morning. We could watch that later, or maybe listen to it. I don't even know if they'll let me put it on, but we could try. Uh, this thing is really moving. Holy goodness! Which way are we going? So everything seems to be working. What I did want to do is jump off and go to. Should we follow underneath this water under here? Because I need to jump off. I don't see any water. Where's the water? Is there water down there? Yeah, okay, there's water. Get our stuff. We're gonna go chop down some trees, I guess. Are the trees supposed to be white? Good question. I could also chop down that whole house right there. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not, but if nobody's living there, why not, right? Okay, we're gonna go down. Well, this is pretty cool the way I got this going through here. All right, we're gonna go down. Try not to drown, because drowning will lose all our stuff. Then we'll respawn somewhere, and I don't know where I am. What's going on? Okay, did somebody build this house, or was it already here? I think AI built this house, or someone built this house. It's fantastic. Someone that built this? Oh my gosh, someone built this house. It could be Bryce. What if Bryce built this house? How do we know? It's a really nice house. Oh my gosh, Bryce, what is that? A ladder? Alright, we are not going to rent this house. This is probably Bryce's house. It's fantastic. Okay, I can take wood from the house. I can take one plank. This one is oak slab. I can look in here, see that I need. Well, I'll take. I guess I'll take that. Shouldn't take his stuff. I could leave him something someday. It's really awesome. I wonder if we could write a name on here, like whose house is this? Are we immediately outside of the water? Do I have a like this? What about these houses? I don't think Bryce made that one. Was this house always here? Just trying to get an idea of what to do, what not to do. Don't want to wreck anything that anybody's made. That would be nice. I'm wondering if I stand up and I go back here. Can you see me? Yeah, I guess you can. But can you hear me? I don't know. But let's stand up for a little while. All right. Standing. A lot of wood. Wood. I'm getting dizzy already standing. I feel like I'm too far back and it's making me dizzy. Can you guys hear me? Well, this would be the mic, right? So if this is the mic, you guys should be able to hear me fine. I can turn up the volume on my TV for just a second. On my TV for just a second. Obviously, you can hear me. On my TV for just a second. Obviously, you can hear me. Obviously, you can hear me. All right, that's good to know. Might go back there. I think I got a sore behind from exercising. Someone's done an amazing job over here. You would think it's Bryce and Sarah. So I shouldn't be down here wrecking their stuff. Am I? And what is this thing? I guess I should ask Bryce. What is this stuff? Should be taking this stuff. We gotta go put this stuff back. What's in here? Don't know. Pink. How did they make that? Is that made out of sand? We could turn on the music for a little while. At least we can see that. It's a very high water thing. And that is pretty. I don't know what that is over there. More ladders? Okay, I'm going to try to put back what I took. I don't know if I did or not successfully. Oh, I do want that though. I'll tell you what. This is my amusement park, and it all is for the betterment of. Why do you need sand right now? Forgot why you needed sand. Why do you need sand? Oh, I remember. You're going to use it in the front of the park. Well, you only need a little bit, so we'll take a little bit of the sand. This is 569.65 negative 362. But this is okay. So we have. Hi, I don't know why someone built all this, or if AI built it immediately when was this pre-built? Who built all this? Is this Bryce? Did you build all this, Bryce? Or is this village already here? Well, someone was here. I love the fence. It's gorgeous. Love the little pond there. Looks like a pond. Looks like fresh water. One house. Two houses. Three houses. Four houses. Five houses. So some people just go to this area. This is all water. We'll find out. Can't get over this? Do I have to go through a gate to get out of here? That's a good question. Oh, I can get out this way. All right, now, question. I'm just trying to get some wood, and I should do it the old-fashioned way. Chop down some trees. Yeah, boy. Look how beautiful this is. more. Who built this? All right, let's maybe we should move along. We'll go to the next. Let's go back up. Try not to be destructive. It's a beautiful village. I like this. The water goes down into the water. It's kind of like a dam of some sort. Yeah, it's not that I don't mind destroying things. If I can't remake it, I don't want to destroy it. Okay, which one has trees? Are all the trees going to be those white ones? I feel bad about knocking them down. This one looks like I should take. Let's take this one. Right now I have almost done. I'm going to try to take this with this. Well, that takes a little while. I'm guessing that I can replant this. So far, this seems the least fun thing, but I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something right or wrong. I don't know. All right, so let's find out. Okay. Let's see what we've collected. 6. Didn't destroy anybody else's artwork, and that thing is just about to go. I might be able to make more. So if that's the case, we're going to go in one of these rooms here. See if there's a crafting table. Squid decorations. No crafting table. Cross the water again. Go in. Crafting table. See what I can make. Doesn't look like I can make much. Kind of a learning experience here today now. I have to make boxes for and how do I make a box? Box. Make this thing. Oh, that's cute. In order to make a box, which I don't see as an option. I'm gonna make them. I think I press the triangle. Now, let's go back in. iron pickaxe help you get? Probably it does. Let's go out of here. Cut some more wood, I guess. Cutting wood seems not very fun. And I can make my own trees, plant trees. Two oak saplings, that's it. And what's all this? Someone planted this? It's beautiful. What about this? Can I plant an oak sapling here? Okay, that was fun. Good job. Yay. We planted an oak sapling. Kind of close to each other, what you think? Let's put it over here. All right, whatever. Okay. Now, we still only have one oak slab. I need to go back in there. At least I planted. I took down 2 trees and I planted 2 trees. Maybe I should just go to work and assume that the wood will magically appear. Okay, this looks like trees over here. Okay, and then I'm over here. Okay, that thing is enough to help me find out where I am. I'm assuming this iron pickaxe will also let me collect the wood. I don't know. We'll find out. You have to use wood. Let's see if I got them. I now have 4. All right, now let's see what's going on here. I have 8. Okay, so it does let me get them. Now, if I grab this tree, see if it, how many of these does it take to plant a new tree? Taking the whole tree away, I guess. Trying to plant more trees. Could be a little on the boring side. What about this white? Should I take the white too? It's not going to make a white floor, is it? Guess there's only one way to find out. We now have only 2 trees I can make. Okay, fine. Well, what is this? Is this oak? This might be the oak that we were originally building the floor out of. Now I think I learned something. Let's find out. So at least we have an area where we can replenish the tree. I'm assuming this part. Yeah, because that's still at 2. And that's 8 there. That's 7. Oh, that's birch. Oak. Oh, that's oak. Okay. That's birch. So replanting stuff really does take some effort. I'll say it does. Oh, look at the apple. That's so pretty. Apparently there is no gravity in this area. The apple was just floating. Should I smile or not smile? I'm not going to smile. I'm relaxing right now. Giving everybody the permission to not smile. Relax your face muscles. Now there's still two. Birch. Would Birch help me design the floor, write stuff in it? Chicago Bulls are playing right now. Money, candy. Oh, good. Cough drop. Oh, this is one of the things we all take for granted, I'll tell you that much. Having people help us. Thank you for everybody that helped me. Can't imagine how many people help me. Trillions of people help me. Trillions of people help me. I wonder if I'm helping them at all. All right. Oh, I wonder if it was written. Well, it's letting us listen to something apparently so far, and not get in copyright trouble. So let's put this back on.
Memories of childhood. Saturday mornings used to mean a specific ritual. You got up early and still wearing your pajamas. You took your pillow upstairs to the family room, got a big bowl of your favorite cereal, and spent the next 5 hours watching cartoons. Saturday morning cartoons represented freedom from school and from responsibility. They represented the innocence of youth. We laughed, we cheered, we learned basic lessons about what it is to be a friend and heroism and right and wrong, and it all seems to have been just a quaint part of a time that has long passed, slowly being relegated to forgotten history, but a history that deserves to be remembered. In his 1998 book, Saturday Morning Fever, author Timothy Burke notes that origins are a tricky matter. He suggests that the origins of Saturday morning cartoons can be traced back to early radio programs targeted at children and, yes, associated with Saturday morning. The website TV Trope suggests the origin was in weekend matinee blogs that movie theaters ran in the first half of the century, which ran back-to-back cartoons, serial cliffhangers, and news bulletins on a continuous loop throughout the day before the feature films proper were screened in the evening. One could attend for the price of a single ticket, arriving at any point in the cycle, leaving once one had gotten back to where they started. Saturday mornings thus constantly saw cinemas packed with rowdy, free-range children, while their parents shopped and ran other errands. Certainly there are important connections to Saturday morning cartoons in these blogs. Cartoons were early seen as a way to attract larger audiences to the theater. So many characters were created between the late 20s to the late 1960s for a theatrical release that the era has become recognized as the golden age of American animation. Many cartoons, originally created for a theatrical release, although often sanitized for younger viewers, were made during this period and later repurposed for Saturday morning shows. Among them were the Looney Tunes, so named because they were originally intended to showcase Warner Brothers. The Bugs Bunny Show would become a staple of Saturday morning cartoons, mostly consisting of anthologies of Warner Brothers cartoons, originally created for theatrical release between 1930 and 1969. The Bugs Bunny Show was part of Saturday morning programming from 1962, roughly to the year 2000. A 2021 poll on the website comingsoon.net ranked The Bugs Bunny Show as the top favorite all-time Saturday morning cartoon. And Looney Tunes was not the only Saturday morning staple to come out of the theatrical cartoon era. Seeing how the Walt Disney Corporation was finding success using cartoon shorts to attract movie audiences, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer created their own cartoon studio. MGM would produce a number of well-known animated characters, chief among them the competing cat and mouse, Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry theatrical shorts would eventually garner 7 Academy Awards, and the characters would later feature prominently on Saturday mornings. Perhaps more importantly for Saturday morning cartoons, however, in 1957, MGM decided to close their animation studio, and the two heads of the studio, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, the creators of Tom and Jerry, took most of the staff and created their own studio. The website of the Norman Rockwell Museum writes, through the next 30 years, Hanna-Barbera produced an astonishing 249 individual cartoon series for television, totaling over 1,200 hours of original episodes. Those included some of the staples of Saturday mornings through the years, Yogi Bear, The Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, The Smurfs, and so many others, including adaptations of DC comic heroes in shows including Super Friends. Wonder Twin powers activate. Shape of marketing. Form of money. But the golden age of American animation passed without creating the cultural phenomenon that would become the Saturday morning cartoon block. Another suggestion is that the origin of the Saturday morning cartoon was Crusader Rabbit, the first cartoon made for television. Encyclopedia.com explains, in 1949, producer Jerry Fairbanks sold NBC on the idea of a new series of cartoons, developed especially for television. His product was a low-budget project titled Crusader Rabbit, created by Jay Ward and Alec Anderson. This simply animated series followed the adventures of an intrepid rabbit and his tiger sidekick. I don't recall anything special about Saturday morning at that point, except that the networks had some vague idea that they wanted programs for kids, Fairbanks said. Still, the encyclopedia writes, Crusader Rabbit failed to trigger a deluge of morning cartoons, and Burke writes that the ritualistic experience of watching television, mostly cheaply animated cartoons from dawn to noon on Saturdays, didn't mature into its familiar shape until the mid-1960s. For example, Ward and Anderson collaborated on another show, perhaps more familiar to many in the audience, originally called Rocky and His Friends, which garnered good ratings when it began airing in 1959, but aired not on Saturdays, but late Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at 5:30. The show, which would become better known under the name Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends, was then shown on Sundays, and it didn't appear on Saturdays until 1981, when it was shown as syndicated reruns. Likewise, Hanna-Barbera's The Flintstones and Warner Brothers' The Bugs Bunny Show originally aired not on Saturday afternoons, but in evening primetime slots. The Flintstones originally premiered in September 1960 and aired on ABC at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. The first animated show to air on prime time, the show had a more mature following than you might recall, being, for example, the first U.S. animated show to portray two people of the opposite sex sleeping in the same bed. And the original sponsor of the show was Winston Cigarettes. While primetime cartoons were finding success, Saturday mornings were not yet what they would become, Burke writes. In fact, Saturday mornings in the late 50s were relatively deserted. Only about a quarter of the total network programming for children could be found on Saturdays in 1958, as compared with over 50% a decade later. But the primetime cartoons were significant, not just in demonstrating that television cartoons could attract an audience, but also by developing new methods of making animation less expensive. Encyclopedia.com writes that in order to feed into the huge time and work demands required to develop a half hour of animation every week, Hanna-Barbera, Ward, and other early television cartoon pioneers developed a wide array of cost-cutting and corner-cutting techniques. In addition to simplifying the animation process, a reduction in quality, although the encyclopedia notes in some cases sharp writing made up for the deficiencies in animation, there were further incentives. The Saturday Evening Post notes, TV networks were finding that animation was not only cheaper to produce than live action shows, but it was also more profitable. They could hire fewer voice actors since many of them played multiple roles, and reruns allowed the cost of the initial investment to be spread out over a longer period of time. These changes justified the shift to large blocks of animated programming on Saturday mornings. Encyclopedia.com continues. As the 1960s progressed, animation was increasingly seen as a children's medium. As a result, animation was funneled away from the primetime slots and into Saturday mornings. The 2021 edition of the Saturday Evening Post notes that when the Flintstones ended its primetime run in 1966, Hanna-Barbera began focusing its attention on the already popular Saturday morning time slot to grow its market. specifically towards children. Encyclopedia.com notes, 1966 marked an important turning point in the history of Saturday morning cartoons. It was the first year that all three major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, broadcast animation blocks on Saturday morning. The era of the Saturday morning cartoon had arrived. Millions of us know exactly what that meant. Brittany Bennett, writing on the website of Netflix, who was admittedly marketing a nostalgic set of classic cartoons shown on the on-demand service, explained in 2021. Picture this. It's Saturday morning and you're a regular kid. No school, no homework, and definitely no job, unless you count minding your rowdy siblings. It's just you, your comfiest pajamas, and a bowl of the sugary cereal that you had to beg mom to buy. That's because Saturday mornings meant more than just being off from school or work. They also mean that you get to delight in the smorgasbord of cartoons, and you absolutely cannot miss your weekly feast. On her personal blog, author Sheila Motion recalled, there was a ritualistic aspect of Saturday morning cartoon viewing that imbued it with a kind of sacred, devotional atmosphere. The only time this amount of cartoon programming ran in this way was on Saturdays. That meant waiting, looking forward to that one day all week you got to spend uninterrupted hours traveling through all sorts of worlds, colored in diverse animation and art styles, and flavored in so many different types of perspectives, from the bananas silly to the save the universe heroic. It was hurling yourself down a pure imagination rabbit hole that felt bottomless. Encyclopedia.com notes how the move to Saturday morning cartoons affected culture. One distinct change wrought was a subtle but irrevocable shift in the makeup of the week. Sunday may be a day of rest, but Saturday is a day of entertainment. In a very real sense, Saturday became an unofficial holiday, an event manufactured by advertisers and programmers to take advantage of a captive audience home from school with little to do, except perhaps park themselves in front of a television set. By and large, parents didn't mind, offered them relief from the children in the form of an electronic pacifier. The sheer volume available itself could represent both a challenge and a freedom to choose that children otherwise were often denied. Motion writes that Hardwood TV was a 25-inch screen, trapped Han Solo Carbonite style in 52 inches of cheap faux wood product that resided in the living room. Rabbit ears gave way to a shiny black cable box, roughly the size of a car battery. It had a dial, which you had to, turn all by yourself to change the channel. No, it's okay if you need to take a moment to collect yourself. She continues. Shows ran concurrent across the three major networks at the time, ABC, NBC, CBS, requiring some deft schedule maintenance on the part of the discerning watcher. In some cases, for me, it was an easy pick between shows like Transformers, Pass, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Acceptable, and He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, runner-up. Other blocks felt like some real Sophie's Choice moments. Smurfs, Snorks, Gooby Bears. Motion wasn't the only one making those decisions. The online Ultimate Pop Culture Wiki notes that in a time not so long ago, Saturday mornings were indicative of one and only one pastime for children watching cartoons. Throughout the 70s and 80s, the broadcast networks ABC, CBS, and NBC dominated the Saturday morning airwaves by inundating children with cartoons. Cartoons on these networks used to earn ratings of more than 20 million viewers. This offered a great deal of financial incentive. Author Gerald Reiki writes on the website Animation World Network in 2003, the greatest benefit to Saturday morning cartoons was their ability to create one venue for advertisers where they could reach 20 million viewers. If a toy company wanted to promote a novel product in the 80s, advertising on Saturday mornings was logical. The Saturday Evening Post notes that the networks could run toy and cereal commercials during these shows, which would entice young viewers into begging their parents to buy these products for them. But that very motivation caused another shift. The Post continues. Parents and educators, however, were worried about how much time children were spending in front of their TV sets. Parents lobbying groups like Action for Children's Television began cropping up in the 1960s, voicing concerns about cartoon violence, stereotypes, and the commercialization and antisocial behaviors associated with hours sitting in front of the TV. While parents weren't able to get a proposed ban on all direct advertising to children in 1978, the Post notes that the lobbying groups represented toy companies and the advertising and cereal industries struck a deal that encouraged children's programming to be balanced out with educational and informational content. This meant that along with the silliness of cartoons, children were getting educational programs as well, notably Schoolhouse Rock and The Bod Squad. Deregulation during the 1980s removed restrictions on advertising towards children, and networks responded by showing shows with direct media tie-ins. The Post writes shows like G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, My Little Pony and Friends, the Transformers, He-Man, She-Ra, Princess of Power, Care Bears, and Jem and the Holograms were all created to sell toys. While cartoons based on Pac-Man, Dungeons and Dragons, and the Rubik's Cube were all about exposing children to games. The Real Ghostbusters, Rambo, The Force of Freedom, and Chuck Norris, Karate Commandos, among other shows, went even further by completing the trifecta of movie, cartoon, toy marketability. As a result, parent groups became even more involved, eventually successfully pressing regulation that would contribute to the downfall of the Saturday morning cartoon. Notably, the 1990 Children's Television Act directly limited the amount of advertising that was allowed during children's programming. Further regulations in 1996 and 2004 placed more strict rules around the requirement to produce children's educational programming. These regulations drastically affected Saturday morning ritual. Author Jamie Logie wrote on the website Better Marketing in 2020, in the 90s, more educational program was required, and kids tended to take a hard pass on that. By 1995, the FCC demanded that networks air 3 hours of educational kids programming per week, along with all the other restrictions on cartoons and marketing. The networks were getting fed up. By 1997, there were so many requirements in place regarding children's programming that many networks just said, screw it. Brittany Benson observes that this decline came along with other changes in culture. Unfortunately, the era wasn't going to last, at least not in its traditional form. The decline of Saturday morning cartoons began in the early 1990s, when parents became less and less thrilled that weekends had turned into what they deemed hours of glorified toy commercials. And as children grew up and the landscape of entertainment changed, so too did the way children played, as well as the things they played with. And when the internet showed up, young people migrated to another screen to spend their time with. The Ultimate Pop Culture Wiki explains that genre's popularity had a broad peak from the late 1960s to the early 1990s. After this point, it declined in the face of changing cultural norms, increased competition from formats available at all times, and heavier regulations. The wiki even notes that the shift was easy for networks. Linda Saminsky, vice president of original programming at Cartoon Network, feels that children's television was never the strength of broadcasters to begin with. There were some good shows in there, but Kids TV was the department where executives at the network would start their nephews out in. Kids TV was never the primary goal of a network. The era that had virtually defined childhood for so many finally came to an end. Author Lord Farley, writing in the 2022 edition of the entertainment website Collider, documents the demise. Falling into the 2000s, Saturday mornings were now populated with repurposed reruns from cable networks or cheap cartoons brought in from other countries. Soon networks began pulling animated shows off the Saturday morning lineup altogether, replacing them with live-action series that met the educational mandates of the government. The Saturday morning ritual was officially declared dead when the CW network aired the last of the Vortex animated lineup on September 27, 2014. While there are vestiges of the old days, it is not, nor will it likely ever be, the same. Gerald Brady writes, the final question remains. Will cartoons ever return to the Saturday mornings to the same degree that they existed during the 70s and 80s? The answer is no. The reason for this is the same reason why people no longer watch silent movies or black and white TVs or primetime sitcoms where married couples sleep in separate beds. Once things evolve, they seldom return to their simpler forms. Saturday morning cartoons were a phenomenon that now resides in the history books. And maybe the demise of Saturday morning cartoons was a good thing, given that the shows that we think of so nostalgically today really were just venues to sell us toys, sugar and cereals. But it sure feels like it was more than that. Brittany Benson concludes, cynics may say that this was a time when cartoons were meant to sell something, but ultimately what made this era of popular culture so special wasn't the products or the sugary cereals that came with so many viewings. The allure of Saturday morning cartoons was about being young, letting yourself laugh helplessly at something silly or the very adventures or destinies.
It is for now. The message I bring is not simply spoken sounds. It is a holy break in your routine. I am present with you, my beloved one. My essence fills this very place you are.
I didn't tell that to come on myself, so we'll listen for a little while.
These are not just soft words to soothe you. This is a divine encounter. Do not treat this as unimportant noise. Listen completely to what I say. For it will form insights that will change your spirit. Every instant we spend together carries profound meaning. Each passage second reflects.
Now, a lot of these things come on to teach you something spiritual. Spend the whole time talking about how important it is to listen, but they don't say anything.
Silence the noise surrounding you, my precious one, and the quick stream of ideas in your head. This is not a thought speaking. It is not grief, or by accident, or merely a thought. It comes from me. It is deliberate. I am here, not just watching, not only holding you in my thoughts from a distance, and within this very space, your unspoken pains have resonated, where your soft requests have risen with tears. I stand close to you, bringing the entirety of my being, yet with the tender attention of a devoted parent whose love has no end. This is not a beautiful description. This is not a reassuring concept meant to calm you. My presence is not far off. It is not something to hope for or desire. It is here, now. I have entered, not because anything was wrong, but because all things have aligned completely. The right moment, your receptiveness, the quiet longing in your heart, all have gathered into this holy point in time. And I chose this precise breath to bring you this awareness. You are genuinely not by yourself. You have anticipated my voice, perhaps expecting vast signs in the heavens or mighty miracles. I chose to come into your world with a peaceful grandeur because I wished for you to feel me before you could clearly perceive me. I did not dispatch anyone else. I did not request another to offer you solace. I arrived personally, but listen well. Not only have I remained, I have been drawing near, awaiting your inner self to quiet enough to understand I was ever present. My beloved one, what you are sensing now is beyond mere emotion. It is a genuine encounter. It is timelessness connecting with your current moment. It is the resonance of my voice, which never stopped speaking, even when your hearing could not detect it. I was anticipating the quiet to grow deep enough for your heart to perceive the truth. I am within this space, and wherever I enter, that place becomes hallowed. It becomes consecrated earth. Therefore, release the need to impress. Put down the weight of regret and disgrace. Stand, or cry, or bow. Respond in whatever way your spirit requires, but do so understanding this. You are not simply envisioning things. You are meeting the nearness of your Maker. And I did not arrive for a short stay. I came to stay. My cherished one, I have perceived every quiet sound that left your heart when you felt utterly alone. I have witnessed your face against a tear-soaked cushion. Your utterance, too delicate to be more than a breath. Still, that soft sound was powerful to me. You did not know it, but each expression of your suffering created a change in the invisible places. I did not just listen to your words. I sensed the profound sorrow beneath them. I did not require volume to be affected. I needed your genuine self. And truly, how open you have been with me in the shadows. You never had to yell for me to listen. You never had to form an ideal plea or cite a particular verse to capture my notice. You simply had to be authentic. And you were. In your frailty, I moved nearer. In your vulnerable sincerity, I approached with all the gentle affection of a devoted parent who always wishes to hear their child speak. I was never seeking a display of flawlessness. I was anticipating the unvarnished truth of your inner self, and you presented it to me. I want you to grasp that I did not remain apart, watching your difficulties from afar. No, I arrived and sat next to you. I was in the still part of your space, closer than your very breathing. I observed the unseen fight behind your cheerful face, the exhaustion beneath your everyday duties. And while others perceived strength, I saw one bearing too much on their own. And that is why I selected this instant, precisely here, precisely now, to tell you, you no longer need to carry these weights by yourself. I am not waiting for you to resolve matters or conclude your challenging times before I intervene. I have already done so. My being touches the fractured spots around you. My touch rests on the areas of your heart that ache without sound. This is not just an expression, my child. Yet, my beloved, you have sensed me in those times when inner strength appeared unbidden, when calm settled chaos without warning, when tears flowed but did not overwhelm your spirit. That was I, not an analogy. It was I. So attend carefully now, my beloved, because I am speaking straight into that part of you that still questions if your expression truly holds significance for me. I have perceived every single utterance, even those you were too hesitant to voice, even the words you breathed softly toward the heavens in the deep hours of the night, hoping someone, anyone, might be paying attention. I did not just perceive them, I collected them. My child, understand this deeply. No whisper you uttered was lost. Every query, every quiet hurt was met with my full attention. While others might have overlooked your difficulties, I counted them precious. When your suffering seemed invisible to those around you, I took note of it deep within myself. And when you felt unseen in the quiet strength of your continued faith, I observed every detail. I listen intently to the words you speak when you are utterly alone, my child. The sincere outpouring of your spirit, spoken when no human ear is near, holds profound weight in my sight. For it is the cries born of deep anguish that truly shift the unseen realm. Though you may have sensed stillness from me, I was responding to you in ways your senses could not yet perceive. Before your eyes even opened this morning, my cherished child, I was already present, expecting this very meeting, preparing for our shared moments. Before the weight of daily life would once more settle upon your spirit, I had already charted the course of your hours. Nothing you have experienced today has caught me off guard. Not your fatigue, not your setbacks, nor the familiar quiet sorrow you carry. You did not merely stumble into this understanding. You were called. That quiet urging, my beloved, was my very self. I have set aside this precise moment, this calm environment, this very breath, because I needed to reveal a truth that the clamor of your days, your striving, your efforts to simply persist, could no longer keep hidden. You are always within my view, my child. While you may have felt disregarded by people, missed out on chances, or experienced ill luck, you have never once slipped from my memory. Your identity is woven into the timelessness of my being. It will not diminish. It cannot escape my perfect recall. You are not merely one among countless others in my creation. You are the object of my specific care. This moment, my child, is more than a temporary solace.
These are really close to each other, so if you could grow.
Me is secure, beyond earthly reach. I did not allow loneliness to be a penalty. I permitted it so you might finally distinguish what truly sustains your inner being from what is superficial. Let me be clear, my beloved child. I did not desert you in your times of sorrow. I journeyed with you through those difficult passages. I supported you when you felt nothing. I firmly guided your way when your determination wavered under the weight of unanswered questions. I was there for every unspoken question, every silent longing, every breath of wordless despair. Unsettling thoughts may have suggested that being out of view meant being insignificant. But I declare to you, my cherished one, your periods of stillness had a purpose. I was protecting you as I tended to your inner self. I was ensuring your safety as I restored your wholeness. The quiet was not oversight, but a consecrated time where I was preparing what is intended for you, shielded from any influence that might disrupt its proper arrival. The distance is closing. The stillness is giving way to clarity. And now, what was obscured is becoming plain. I am not merely affirming you of my nearness. I am demonstrating it. With my actual being, in my strength with a time so profoundly filled with my essence. This will become the basis for your next stage of growth. This is not the conclusion of your patience. It marks the start of a new segment in your journey. And though your physical perceptions might still be adjusting, my precious one, your inner self already comprehends. It perceives the cadence of my arrival, the subtle stirring of the sacred at work, the movement you sensed in the quiet, that inexplicable feeling that arose within your core when nothing
It sure
external.
feels as if something was lost. Author Aaron Nettie summed up what many of us feel in a 2013 edition of Philadelphia Magazine. He says, I know it's a back in the day or walk both way uphill, but I feel that kids today are being robbed of a magical experience. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guide. Check out our community on thehistoryguideguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguide.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guide on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on Forgotten History, all you have to do is subscribe.
Okay, so there you have it.
For almost a century, the Walt Disney Company was the standard bearer of wholesome family entertainment, from the early days of their animated projects, such as Steamboat Willie, to their family-oriented television series, such as The Mickey Mouse Club and The Wonderful World of Disney, which featured great wholesome family films. Such classics as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fantasia, Bambi, and Old Yeller created an enormous entertainment icon, acknowledged worldwide. Even the Europeans in the 1930s were enamored with Walt Disney's work. In the last few years, Disney took a massive financial hit when it decided to get political and join the woke movement. Millions of Americans and even others overseas canceled subscriptions and terminated their vacations to Disneyland and Disney World in protest. So what changed? There have also been many erroneous rumors, conjecture, and falsehoods leveled at the company's founder, Walt Disney. So let's set the record straight. Who was Walt Disney? How did he create one of the most successful entertainment companies in history? What impact did he have on history? How influential was he? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
Okay, we're now going to see if I got any wood for the.
Walter Elias
That's where I was, I
Disney
think.
born on December 5th,
I think all that was made by-
1901 in Chicago, Illinois, and his parents were of German, English, and Irish descent, while Walt and his older brother Roy, born June 24th, 1893,
German, English,
were young.
and
The family
Irish.
moved to Marceline, Missouri, then to Kansas City, Missouri, and then back again to Chicago. Walt Disney loved art and studied at the Kansas City Institute and later Chicago Art Institute, and was the cartoonist for the school magazine. When the USA entered the First World War, he dropped out of high school and tried to enlist in the Army. Being rejected for being underage, he joined the Red Cross as a civilian volunteer and was sent to France in late 1918
France.
as an ambulance driver. The
Ambulance driver.
bondage he saw affected him. In 1917, Roy enlisted in the U.S. Navy, but was discharged 2 years later when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Afterward, Walt moved to Kansas City in 1919, working several jobs until he was hired in the film industry, working for the Kansas City Film Ad Company in the new field of animation. Walt, being a cartoonist, had found the perfect place as a commercial illustrator at the age of 18. Walt and Roy both moved to California in the early 1920s, establishing the Disney Brothers Studio, hoping to get in on the new film industry. Walt believed that cell animation was the future of animation, as opposed to the commonly used cutout method, but he met a lot of resistance. Disney Brothers decided to open a new business with a co-worker from the Film Ad Company. Fred Harmon. Their only regular client was the local Newman Theater, which played their short cartoons called Newman's Laugh-O-Grams, which were modern versions of Aesop's fables, as a model. But they did not meet with success, and they eventually went bankrupt. Walt and Roy still believed in their formula and created a new film called The Alice Comedies, based on the adventures of Alice in Wonderland, and they tried to find a distributor to get it into theaters. Nothing was working out until New York film distributor Margaret J. Winkler contacted them. She was losing the rights to 2 cartoon projects, Out of the Inkwell and Felix the Cat, and she wanted a new animated series. A contract was signed for 6 Alice comedies with an option for 2 further series of 6 episodes each. Margaret Winkler's distribution of the Alice series was taken over by her husband, the film producer Charles Mintz, in 1926, and the series ran until July 1927. But the Disney brothers decided to move away from the mixed format to all animation. Mintz wanted new material for distribution through Universal Pictures, so Walt Disney and Ub Iwerks created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, a character Disney wanted to be happy, alert, saucy, and venturesome, keeping him also neat and trim. But Universal Pictures controlled the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and the brothers saw no profit, so Walt rejected a new offer from Universal, deciding that he and Roy were better off working for themselves. Walt wanted to create a new character, unique, that could become the Disney trademark, so Walt and Ub Iwerks created Mickey Mouse. Iwerks drew Mickey Mouse, and Walt gave it the voice. This would be launched by the iconic short cartoon Steamboat Willie, followed by Donald Duck and other legendary figures. In 1932, Walt received his first Academy Award for the Best Short Subject, Cartoons for the 3 Colored Flowers and Trees, and he also received a special Academy Award for Mickey Mouse. In 1933, the brothers created their successful short cartoon, the most successful of all time, The 3 Little Pigs, in 1933, which had the famous song, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? Snow White came out in December 1937 to high praise from critics and audiences, and it was the most successful film of 1938, and by 1939 its total gross of $6.5 million made it the most successful sound film made to that date. They were so popular, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels gave Hitler 12 reels of Disney films for Christmas in 1937. According to film director, actress, and producer Leni Riefenstahl, Hitler loved the Disney material. Most people do not know that his favorite animated film was Snow White, and he kept a personal reel which he viewed on occasion. Even Joseph Stalin was a fan of the Disney products, along with Benito Mussolini. As the storm clouds gathered over Europe, the entertainment industry was not immune. Partisan lines were being drawn. Famed aviator Charles Lindbergh was an open isolationist, not wanting American involvement in any foreign wars, and Walt Disney felt the same way. After the world learned of the November 1938 riots in Germany and Austria known as Kristallnacht, public opinion was divided, but Walt Disney paid no attention to it. In fact, he had previously sent an invitation to the German filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl, whose black and white film noir propaganda films, such as Triumph of the Will in 1935 and Olympia in 1936, covering the Berlin Olympics, were considered groundbreaking cinematography. Walt Disney and Frank Capra both were enamored with her style. Leni arrived in December, and her visit to Walt Disney Studios stirred some controversy at the time, but even more in later years. Animation historian Jim Korkis believes that Disney also met with Riefenstahl for financial reasons, as an attempt by Disney to recover 135,000 Reichsmarks owed from his German film distributor and to get the ban on Disney films lifted in Germany. At that time, orchestra conductor Leopold Stokowski was writing the score for the soon-to-be classic Fantasia and had several mutual friends along with Riefenstahl. As a result, Disney was then and ever since accused of anti-Semitism, as well as racial bigotry, due to his film Song of the South, none of which was true. In January 1939, a spokesman for Disney told the New York Daily News, and I quote, Miss Riefenstahl got into the studio, but she crashed the gate. A Los Angeles man who is known to Disney obtained permission to take a party through the plant. Lenny was in the party. If we had known it in advance, she wouldn't have got in. This statement was only made after an uproar from the local Jewish community, which heavily controlled the film and entertainment industry, most of which were direct competitors of the Disney Company. In fact, Disney hired many Jewish illustrators, and Walt himself was well known to be apolitical, never having a racist idea, thought, or statement. Pinocchio and Fantasia were both released in 1940, but neither did very well at the box office, partly because revenues from Europe had dropped following the start of World War II in 1939. The studio incurred a loss on both pictures and was deeply in debt by the end of February 1941. In late 1940, Walt and Roy decided to offer stock in the company and take it public to increase revenue. Other measures included salary cuts to staff and reduced hiring, which resulted in the animators' strike, which lasted 5 weeks. Then the U.S. government approached Walt Disney in early 1941, seeing that war was probably inevitable. Walt Disney had a meeting with Henry Morgenthau Jr., the Secretary of the Treasury, and agreed to produce short Donald Duck cartoons to promote war bonds after the U.S. entered the war. This saw the creation of the Walt Disney Training Films Unit, producing instruction films for the military such as 4 methods of flush riveting and aircraft production methods. Disney also produced several propaganda productions, including shorts such as Der Fuhrer's Face, which won an Academy Award, as well as the 1943 feature film Victory Through Air Power. Disney also made propaganda films against the Nazis for both the public as well as educational and training films for the United States government. Disney offered to produce films for the armed forces to make training films for national defense industries at cost and without profit. The military films only covered the company's costs, and the film Bambi did poorly after its release in 1942 and lost $200,000 at the box office, including the lackluster performance of Pinocchio and Fantasia. The Disney Company had debts of $4 million with the Bank of America in 1944. Disney slowed down producing short films and cartoons due to the rise of Warner Brothers and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. That was when Roy Disney suggested more combined animation and live-action productions to increase revenue, also to challenge the competition. In 1948, Disney launched live-action nature films titled True Life Adventures, with Seal Island being the first, winning the Academy Award in the Best Short Subject category. It was during this time that Walt Disney left the Democrat Party.
Hi, Bryce.
Republican. The reasons were...
One time I went out and I chopped down some trees all by myself. I didn't know if I was wrecking your house out there. I was trying to behave. But I got some trees and I'm just making some floor. How's it going with you guys? Oh, you're proud of me. I can't read the whole thing because I'm playing a Walt Disney movie, but I can switch over. Alright, let's see what we got here. Bobby said, I'm proud of you. We don't depend on other people, right? Let's see what Bryce just said. He said, have a good time. Why I have to go. Just got off work from GameStop and I'm going to Chipotle. Have a good... Proud of you. We don't have a house. Oh. GameStop. Alright, I forgot. Great. Why I have to go. What a perfect job for you. Just got off work from GameStop.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land.
Disneyland, the original Disney theme park located in Anaheim, California. It's the only one to be created and enjoyed by Walt Disney himself. It's easy to assume it was built by a powerful entertainment empire, led by a ruthless businessman chasing profit. But the truth behind Walt Disney's journey into the creation of Disneyland tells a very different story. Walt grew up in a large working-class family, often taking odd jobs for his father, whose business ventures frequently changed, including a stint running a farm. After serving as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross during the First World War, Walt pursued his passion for drawing, creating short cartoons called Laugh-O-Grams and selling them to Kansas City Film Ad. By 1922, they gained traction, and he started his first studio with a group of young artists, but it quickly folded. Broke and out of options, Walt followed the advice of his older brother, Roy Oliver Disney, and moved to Los Angeles in 1923 with just $40 in his wallet and half a suitcase of clothes. Roy was in a veterans hospital suffering from tuberculosis when Walt visited with news of interest in his animation live-action series, Alice's Wonderland. Seeing an opportunity, Walt convinced Roy to help him launch a new studio. Roy left the hospital and persuaded their uncle to invest $500 and lend them his garage, where the Disney Brothers studio was born. Roy, though frail and gaunt, never returned to the hospital, and his tuberculosis miraculously cleared.
Miraculously clear.
Roy
Okay.
had helped me, and I wanted Roy and I to be partners. That was all. I mean, we just wanted to be partners, you know. Roy not knowing the business.
There's your miracle, everybody.
Roy had faith in me. Same as he did when I was in Kansas City, he'd send me those checks.
The Disney Brothers studio, later renamed to Walt Disney Productions, would go on to produce popular shows, movies, and characters. Mickey
I think I'll
Mouse was
carry a
introduced
boat
in
around with me
1928,
from now on.
making Walt Disney world famous. Then later, the popular Silly Symphonies series pushed the boundary of animation and storytelling. And eventually, the studio would create the world's first full-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Where did you originally get the first notion? Well, it came about when my daughters were very young, and I started, it was always Maddie's Day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, you know, different things, and I'd take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places, and I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, you know, eating peanuts. I felt that there should be something here.
All right, that's it. I'm eating peanuts.
The parents and the children was to have fun together.
The stories and characters the studio created took the world by storm, and tourists who flocked to Hollywood wanted to visit the Disney studio in hopes of finding something magical. But Walt's studio was nothing more than ordinary offices and sound stages, surrounded by well-tended lawns and rose gardens. Walt needed something that could buffer their disappointment. In the early 1940s, he thought of a themed corner of the studio where visitors could meet their favorite characters. But this project eventually grew into an idea for an 11-acre park across the street. In the early 1950s, Walt had been offering rides on his backyard live steam railroad in Holmby Hills, California. And the sheer number of visitors the railroad received prompted Walt to consider that Mickey Mouse Park idea more seriously. Roy Disney, who was essentially the CEO of the company, was skeptical about opening an amusement park. Even Walt's wife Lillian had said, "Why would you want that? Amusement parks are so dirty and dangerous." Walt simply responded, "That's just it. Mine wouldn't be." Reluctantly, Roy agreed to set aside money for research, and Lillian conceded to go along with it. In early 1953, Imagineer Harper Goff explained to Walt that the current designs of the park exceeded the 11-acre land parcel across from the studio. It wasn't until the Burbank City Council denied his request to build an amusement park that Walt finally admitted it was time to look for land in a different place. To get financial backing, Roy knew a pile of papers with descriptions of the park were not enough to make a convincing pitch, so he asked Walt to have artwork commissioned to help potential financiers to visualize the concept. He turned around and called upon one of his studio's best artists, Herb Ryman, to create the rendering of the park over the weekend. Herb said no. "I'm only just seeing these plans. I don't want to create an embarrassment for you or me."
And he went over and stood in the corner. And he kind of turned around and looked at me, and he said, "Well, He said, "Will you do it if I stay here with you?" So, of course, Walt, as you know, was a very persuasive person.
The two of them worked throughout the weekend to generate the first image for the park that Walt would later name Disneyland, a name that Ryman lightheartedly joked had sounded somewhat egotistical. The artwork depicted the park with 4 themed lands: a jungle to represent the land of adventure, a futuristic city to represent the land of tomorrow, an Old West town complete with a riverboat to represent the frontier, and a large medieval forecourt with a fairy tale castle to act as the park's visual icon. This represented the land of fantasy, complete with a carousel to pay homage to the idea that started it all. And surrounding the park would be a miniature railroad that would surpass any steam train hobbyist's greatest dream. Roy made arrangements for Walt Disney Productions to allot $10,000 towards the research and development of Disneyland. But when Walt needed more money, Roy suggested he create a private company that would own the rights to Walt Disney's name. That way he could license the name out to Walt Disney Productions, giving him weekly funding for the project. And so Walt created Retlaw Enterprises in the year 1950. It was the name Walter spelled backwards. And by licensing his own name to the bigger company, he received a weekly income of $3,000. Walt hired an architectural firm to design his park, but wasn't satisfied with their concepts. He turned to his friend for advice, the famed architect Welton Becket. He reviewed Walt's ideas for fanciful architecture built from modern materials. "Walt, no one can design Disneyland for you. We don't have that kind of background for this," Becket said. "You'll have to use your own people." To build his Magic Kingdom, Walt needed complete control. He didn't want Walt Disney Productions' board of directors voting or vetoing his ideas before they came to fruition. In 1952, he created Walt Disney Incorporated, which was quickly renamed to WED Enterprises the next year. WED stood for the initials of Walter Elias Disney, and it was his newly dubbed team of Imagineers at WED Enterprises that would dream up all of the future things that would go into Disneyland. While Roy was able to get some financial backers, such as Bank of America, he still wasn't having much luck. Walt called around to various television studios offering that he could help fund his park in exchange for him starring in a television series he simply called Disneyland. Until then, he continued borrowing money to help pay for the development of his park. He took out $50,000 from his life insurance and then sold his Palm Springs vacation home. When his wife Lillian found out he had spent over $100,000 of their money, she was livid. Walt reminded her that when the park would finally open, Lillian and her daughters would receive a 15% return on any merchandise that visitors bought with his name on it. Still, Lily feared that his plan would only work if the park would open, which seemed increasingly impossible with each passing day. Walt hired a couple of men from the Stanford Research Institute, C.V. Wood and Harrison Buzz Price. Their job was to find the land required for the park. Walt's requirements to Buzz were that he needed 100 acres, which could not be located anywhere near the beach in order to avoid the types of visitors that might show up. And the park would need to be easily accessible from all corners of Southern California. It wasn't easy. Buzz and CV scoured 5 counties, an area roughly 35,000 square miles in size. Eventually, they came back to Walt with a specific parcel, 200 acres of orange and walnut groves in the sleepy rural town of Anaheim, California.
I'm the first guy that saw that site, bar none. It was a bunch of orange groves.
It was cheap land butted up against the still under construction 5 freeway, giving convenient access to both Los Angeles and San Diego. And yet, it was far enough away from the big cities that they could avoid the vagrants and riffraff. C.V. Wood quickly snatched up all 200 acres, sometimes resorting to sneaky tactics to get the farmers to sell. C.V. Wood was a controversial figure that made Walt Disney suspicious of him, but he was a very capable man, and Walt made him vice president and general manager of Disneyland. One of the farm families, by the name of Dominguez, had only one request. On their land were 2 Canary Island date palm trees planted years before, during a family wedding. They hoped Walt wouldn't cut down the trees. Being the sentimentalist that he was, Walt gave his word that the trees would stay standing, a promise that survives even to this day as the two trees are both located adjacent to the Jungle Cruise loading area. Walt had purchased the land using money given to him by Bank of America, but he was still in need of construction funding. Roy went back to New York to request more money, but they refused to lend any more unless Walt could find a major financial backer.
That's good.
It turned out ABC Television Network was looking to compete with more popular stations and was in need of a big name like Walt Disney to boost its popularity. ABC agreed to fund a large portion of the construction in exchange for Walt starring in the weekly Disneyland TV show and giving them 35% ownership in the park. When Roy left the meeting, he immediately went back to Bank of America to increase their loan to a further $8 million. Disneyland was now funded by a total of $17 million, and almost no one involved was fully convinced the idea would be a success. On July 16, 1954, site leveling began. Walt was adamant that the park would open the next year on July 17th, just 366 days of construction, an impossible deadline even for the mid-1950s. To save money on fully grown trees, horticulture imagineer Bill Evans suggested keeping some of the orange and walnut trees. He tied special ribbons to the trees, indicating which were to be removed and which would stay. As it turned out, the bulldozer driver was colorblind and had been removing all the trees using his best guess as to which would stay. The contractor arrived on the site and ran out to the bulldozer driver to stop him before he destroyed any more plants. Groundbreaking on Disneyland happened on July 21, 1954, and C.V. Wood brought in retired Navy Admiral turned naval architect Joe Fowler to manage the construction contracts and oversee the work being done. Original construction plans called for the True Life Adventureland to be placed on the east side of the park, but Imagineer Bill Evans discovered a line of mature eucalyptus trees that were planted to shield the farms from the seasonal Santa Ana winds. Evans informed Walt that the trees could protect the jungle foliage if Adventureland was placed on the west side of the park instead. When it came to the landscaping of Disneyland, Walt was inspired by the Tivoli Gardens of Copenhagen in Denmark. Bill Evans had the monumental task of planting up 60 acres of themed park to look like it had been there for ages. The sheer number of foliage he had to purchase for the park easily exhausted both his company's nurseries and all the local ones from Santa Barbara to San Diego, a roughly 80-mile radius from Disneyland. Evans split the landscape design with Imagineer Ruth Shellhorn. She was already an accomplished landscape architect, and she would design the more civilized areas of the park like Main Street, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland, whereas Bill would create the exotic landscapes of Adventureland and Frontierland. The former of which was particularly troublesome considering that Southern California was a dry coastal plain, but the jungle plants of Adventureland would require humidity and lots of water. With California being so limited on the kinds of plants that were sold, Bill ended up flying to countries around the world and collecting plant specimens for the park. He sometimes sneaked seeds from exotic plants into the country by placing them in his socks. In his effort to acquire the most exotic plants, Bill Evans even discovered a species of plant that would later be named after him, Philodendron evansii. These plants are still alive and well in Disneyland's Jungle Cruise today. Meanwhile, Roy Disney had been worried about how the park was going to turn a profit. Research suggested that merchandise sales alone could carry the financial burdens of the park, but he feared all the Disney merchandise combined could not fill the numerous gift shops around the park. They would have to be rented out to third-party retailers. Park sponsorships could also help ease the cost of operation, but Disneyland was such a risk that no company wanted to accept a sponsorship deal. That was until C.V. Wood managed to convince the Swift Meatpacking Company to agree to operate the Market House on Main Street. There's around 40 other companies that promptly signed up. Walt was so excited to show off the progress of his park to his friend, television host Art Linkletter, he made him promise that he couldn't tell anyone what he was about to see. Linkletter recalled, "I couldn't believe my eyes. We were driving through orange groves and dirt roads. I didn't tell him what I really thought, that he was out of his mind. After all, it was 45 minutes from where people lived and there was nothing there." The first building completed at Disneyland was the Main Street Opera House, which had a massive floor space used as a lumber mill and machine shop to construct the rest of the park. The next building was a firehouse next to City Hall. Above the firehouse, on the second level, was a tiny one-bedroom apartment for Walt and Lily. During the final stages of construction, Walt would stay overnight on the weekends to oversee the progress being made, offering up advice and instruction along the way. When it came to Tomorrowland, Walt wanted to showcase the innovations of the near future. At this time, freeways across California were being constructed, and Americans were excited to see a highway that featured no stops. It was this that inspired Walt to create an almost utopian auto motorway for Disneyland, and he would call it Autopia. Bob Gurr was fresh out of school for auto body design and was hired as an Imagineer for WED. Bob's first task was to design the cars for the Autopia, which was a task much more difficult than it seems. He needed a miniature car that could be operated by one pedal, could drive all day on low gear, withstand constant impact without cracking the frame, and could be easily driven even by a child. This immediately required the transmission to withstand such rigorous work with a modified clutch. But it was Bob's ability to think on the spot and offer insight that Walt would also appoint him to design other ride vehicle projects around the park. While vehicles gave meant for Walt and Lily. During the final stages of construction, Walt would stay overnight on the weekends to oversee the progress being made, offering up advice and instruction along the way. When it came to Tomorrowland, Walt wanted to showcase the innovations of the near future. At this time, freeways across California were being constructed, and Americans were excited to see a highway that featured no stops. It was this that inspired Walt to create an almost utopian auto motorway for Disneyland, and he would call it Autopia. Bob Gurr was fresh out of school for auto body design and was hired as an Imagineer for WED. Bob's first task was to design the cars for the Autopia, which was a task much more difficult than it seems. He needed a miniature car that could be operated by one pedal, could drive all day on low gear, withstand constant impacts without cracking the frame, and could be easily driven even by a child. This immediately required the transmission to withstand such rigorous work, especially with a modified clutch. But it was Bob's ability to think on the spot and offer insight that Walt would also appoint him to design other ride vehicle projects around the park. While vehicles gave Disneyland its motion, the wonder that the park would inspire was the result of the shape of its landscape. A Magic Kingdom with flat land doesn't leave much of an impression, especially considering that Walt didn't want the public to be able to see inside the park from the outside, and he didn't want the incredible landscapes within to be shattered by views of the surrounding city.
This was no place for a man with a hand shovel. Scooping out lakes and broad riverbeds paid off in enough dirt for rolling hills, islands, and mountains.
The massive amounts of dirt excavated from the ground were then used to create a system of berms that would surround the park, some of them towering 30 feet high. In fact, there was so much dirt that it would have cost too much money to move it off-site, so the extra earth was piled up next to the castle in a mound that was lovingly nicknamed Holiday Hill. Over in Frontierland, the Rivers of America was carved out and filled with water, only for crews to arrive the next day and find out all the water had soaked into the sandy Anaheim soil. Admiral Joe Fowler discovered a local clay, and he had the river lined with it to prevent the water from being absorbed into the ground. Anticipating the rapid development of Disneyland and businesses springing up along Harbor Boulevard, the city of Anaheim had to allocate 800 acres of land surrounding the park in order to provide it with public works. The farmers who had lived on the property before Disneyland had lived somewhat off-grid, without access to municipal water or gas, and some homes didn't even have electricity. Nearly 2 miles of clay pipe were laid down Harbor Boulevard to connect Disneyland with the city's wastewater sewage services. New power lines were erected to supply the park with enough power to light a small town. The only thing they didn't get from the city was a way to expel rainwater runoff. Admiral Joe Fowler suggested that Disneyland's gutters could drain into the man-made rivers and moats of the park, allowing these bodies of water to be topped off by seasonal rainfall. Even to this day, some of the original rainwater gutters still drain into the park's major outdoor waterways. Funds for Disneyland continued to run thin. Fowler explained there may not be enough money to complete the Mark Twain riverboat. Walt mortgaged his remaining home to fund the completion of it. His wife Lily protested this, and of course he got into a heated argument with his brother. Roy pleaded that he consider postponing the opening of the park in order to ensure its proper completion. But Walt was adamant that he gave the public his word. The park would open on July 17th, come hell or high water. If it didn't, they might lose the confidence of all the creditors and sponsors, and the company would suffer as shareholders might pull out, causing a rippling effect that would doom the park and the studio. Disneyland was widely predicted to fail and take the Disney company down with it. But Walt stood firm. He'd been underestimated before, with Mickey Mouse and again with Snow White. In 1934, newspapers mocked the idea of a feature-length cartoon, calling Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs Walt's Folly. The film cost $1.5 million, 10 times the cost of a regular cartoon, and all that money was borrowed. Failure meant bankruptcy. Instead, Snow White premiered to huge success in 1937, earning $8 million upon its initial release. With the profits, Walt built a state-of-the-art studio in Burbank, complete with animation wings and an in-house animation school, air conditioning, and natural light, all designed to foster creativity and comfort. 2 decades later, that very studio was nearly paralyzed by the demands of building Disneyland. The studio temporarily halted animation as their top artists were reassigned to work on Disneyland. The company wasn't producing any live-action films either, because its sound stages were repurposed as fabrication sites for ride systems and special effects. Every dollar, every asset the company had was sunk into Disneyland. The Disney brothers had exhausted their personal finances, gambling it all on Walt's dream. Everything they had worked toward, everything they built over the last 27 years hung in the balance, entirely dependent on the success of what would become the world's first true theme park.
And I think that Roy has done a lot of things there against his better judgment because he felt that I wanted to do it.
To help speed up construction of the park, cutting-edge techniques were used. Parts of the buildings and their facades were prefabricated in the Opera House and installed in sections in their final location. This technique was prominently used for the installation of the towers and turrets of the castle, as well as the rooftops of Main Street Station, and even for constructing the Mark Twain riverboat. The layout of Disneyland was also something master planned. Many amusement parks often tried to maximize land use by placing rides and buildings wherever space would allow. But Walt noticed that this resulted in people getting lost and walking unnecessary distances. Disneyland was designed in a spoke and wheel shape, with the various lands fanning out from the center. The park itself had only one exit, so that people wouldn't get confused about which way led to their car. And each land within the Magic Kingdom had only one entrance, ensuring that you couldn't get lost while inside Disneyland because all lands emptied back into the Central Plaza. Forced perspective was in heavy use at Disneyland, thanks to the artistry of the Imagineers who were used to designing film sets. Disney could use forced perspective for purposes other than decoration. Walt wanted guests entering the park to marvel at its size, so the building facades on the north end of Main Street were designed slightly shorter than the building facades at the south end, giving the illusion of distance. And this worked well in reverse too, because at the end of a tiring day, the guests would head back down Main Street, and the larger buildings at the south end made the exit of the park look closer than it really was. Forced perspective was also used on all the individual buildings as well. Walt wanted Disneyland to have charm, a sense that could be achieved with a miniature scale. This is why most buildings and park transportation systems, even to this day, are constructed in 5/8 scale. Although this is loosely followed, since the various restaurants and gift shops, which may look multi-leveled, would actually be made from 3 different scales. The bottom level of most buildings in Disneyland are 9/10 of real size, while the second level is 5/8, and the third level, if any, is half scale. Essentially, as the buildings rise higher, the scale decreases with each level. The park's icon, Sleeping Beauty Castle, is designed in varying scales at random in order to throw off the observer's sense of size. This helped lend the castle's fairy tale appearance, although the paint job given to the castle was not one that Walt Disney or his Imagineers liked, but they didn't have time to dedicate to it, so they left it with a simple blue and gray color scheme. one that would haunt Imagineer John Hench for years afterward. As the final spire was lifted to the top of the castle, it officially became the tallest structure in Disneyland, towering 77 feet over Fantasyland, and it would maintain the title of the tallest structure in the park until Matterhorn would be added 4 years later. Walt insisted the finial caps on the rooftops of the castle turrets be gold-plated to impress park guests. Roy insisted it was too costly, so Walt ordered gold finials anyway. Roy would later admit the 24-karat gold finials indeed impressed park goers, and it was a good decision. With so little time and money to complete the park, Walt had to make do with some alterations to the plan. Fantasyland couldn't get its expensive fairy tale village look, so Imagineers settled for a medieval fair theme. Tomorrowland was the least complete area. They had to fill the empty buildings with random exhibits like the Bathroom of Tomorrow, and they even installed the sets left over from the production of Walt Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea motion picture. Despite the numerous setbacks, the construction crews made up for it by tripling in size closer to the opening day. Many operations were going around the clock, and crews put in double shifts. Walt would walk the park having crews tweaking the appearance of things. He even asked Imagineer Bill Evans to move a 6-ton, 30-foot-wide pepper
Getting some
tree
soup,
in
everybody.
Adventureland about 6 feet, just because it was too close to a park walkway. There are also images of a small bandstand gazebo that was moved to several locations, but in each one it blocked views. C.V. Wood was doing a great deal of work to keep the construction moving along swiftly, but the ethics of his tactics were sometimes questionable. Walt felt that Wood was only out to advance his own agenda. This caused the two men to often butt heads, and their relationship deteriorated to the point that soon after the park opened, Walt would fire him and erase his name from the company's history.
Why did you do
On
that?
July 4th, 1950, South End made the exit of the park look closer than it really was. Forced perspective was also used on all the individual buildings as well. Walt wanted Disneyland to have charm, a sense that could be achieved with a miniature scale. This is why most buildings and park transportation systems, even to this day, are constructed in 5/8 scale. Although this is loosely followed, since the various restaurants and gift shops, which may look multi-leveled, would actually be made from 3 different scales. The bottom level of most buildings in Disneyland are 9/10 of real size, while the second level is 5/8, and the third level, if any, is half scaled. Essentially, as the buildings rise higher, the scale decreases with each level. The park's icon, Sleeping Beauty Castle, is designed in varying scales at random in order to throw off the observer's sense of size. This helped lend the castle's fairy tale appearance, although the paint job given to the castle was not one that Walt Disney or his Imagineers liked, but they didn't have time to dedicate to it, so they left it with a simple blue and gray color scheme, one that would haunt Imagineer John Hench for years afterward. As the final spire was lifted to the top of the castle, it officially became the tallest structure in Disneyland, towering 77 feet over Fantasyland, and it would maintain the title of the tallest structure in the park until Matterhorn would be added 4 years later. Walt insisted the finial caps on the rooftops of the castle turrets be gold-plated to impress park guests. Roy insisted it was too costly, so Walt ordered gold finials anyway. Roy would later admit the 24-karat gold finials indeed impressed park goers, and it was a good decision. With so little time and money to complete the park, Walt had to make do with some alterations to the plan. Fantasyland couldn't get its expensive fairy tale village look, so Imagineers settled for a medieval fair theme. Tomorrowland was the least complete area. They had to fill the empty buildings with random exhibits like the Bathroom of Tomorrow, and they even installed the sets left over from the production of Walt Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea motion picture. Despite the numerous setbacks, the construction crews made up for it by tripling in size closer to the opening day. Many operations were going around the clock, and crews put in double shifts. Walt would walk the park having crews tweaking the appearance of things. He even asked Imagineer Bill Evans to move a 6-ton, 30-foot-wide pepper tree in Adventureland about 6 feet, just because it was too close to a park walkway. There are also images of a small bandstand gazebo that was moved to several locations, but in each one it blocked views. C.V. Wood was doing a great deal of work to keep the construction moving along swiftly, but the ethics of his tactics were sometimes questionable. Walt felt that Wood was only out to advance his own agenda. This caused the two men to often butt heads, and their relationship deteriorated to the point that soon after the park opened, Walt would fire him and erase his name from the company's history. On July 4th, 1955, Walt held a U.S. Independence Day party at the nearly complete park. The main attraction was for his friends and company employees to get their first ride aboard the Disneyland Railroad, even though they could only ride part of the way around the park. The party concluded in the evening with fireworks in the sky. It would be the first fireworks show Disneyland ever had. Walt's Disneyland Railroad was the single most expensive attraction in the entire park, costing $240,000, but he insisted that it be built. He was a lifelong railroad enthusiast and even offered visitors rides on his backyard live-steam railroad he called the Carolwood Pacific. When Disneyland was in its early stages of design, he wanted the park to have its own railroad, which, aside from its miniature scale, would operate just as the old-fashioned puffers used to. A team of Imagineers, including Roger Broggie, Jerry Best, and Earl Vilmer, helped to scale up Walt's tiny Lilybell locomotive into two large steam engines that hauled authentic rolling stock. The two locomotives were built in 5/8 scale and ran on 3-foot narrow-gauge tracks, which were all hand-laid into the park. The C.K. Holiday engine number 1 fit perfectly at the Frontierland Depot with its freight train of cattle cars, gondolas, and caboose, while the E.P. Ripley engine number 2 was better suited for Main Street Station since it hauled a set of 6 passenger coaches. The two engines were named after two founding members of the Santa Fe Railway, the company that sponsored Disneyland's trains. Admiral Joe Fowler, with his experience building structures in the Navy's strict timelines, managed to have the railroad roundhouse constructed in under a week. On July 13, 1955, just 4 days before the park was unveiled to the public, Walt and his wife Lily celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in the Golden Horseshoe Saloon in Frontierland. As Lillian was cutting the cake, Walt's peers cheered for him to make a speech, so he stood atop a chair to address the crowd. But as he stood there, beaming with pride and soaking in the view of all the happy faces looking back at him, he forgot to speak. For the first time, Walt got a glimpse of what his life's achievement would be like. An old Western saloon in the middle of a magic kingdom, filled with joyous grins and happy chatter. His daughter Sharon noticed tears in her father's eyes, and she went up and took him by the hand, encouraging him to make his speech. The night would end with an evening cruise aboard the Mark Twain riverboat as its paddle wheel churned the waters of the river. Joe Fowler would later find Lillian Disney cleaning up after the party. She had a broom in hand, and she swept the decks of the boat. Fowler grabbed another broom and joined her. On the night before Disneyland's grand opening, Walt Disney and his artist-turned-Imagineer Ken Anderson were in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea exhibit in Tomorrowland. Ken was trying to get the giant squid to work, and Walt was busy painting the backdrop. But eventually Walt had to concede that it was getting late, and the exhibit would just have to wait to open another day. The two men parted ways, and Walt went to check on Main Street one last time before climbing up to his private apartment above the firehouse to tuck into bed for the night. The park was only mere hours away from being unveiled before the people of the world. Opening day had come. It was Sunday, July 17th, 1955. Roy Disney had gotten up that morning after hardly getting any sleep. He knew that Walt and the ABC network had planned a live telecast of the opening day events. Nothing like this had ever been done before. Up until that day, the most television cameras ever used at a live event were 7. But in order to cover the grand scale of Disneyland, ABC had to borrow and rent cameras from other networks, giving a total of 29 television cameras, 80,000 feet of cable, and 14 improvised forklift camera platforms to deliver the festivities to a record-breaking viewership of 90 million across the country. Roy Roy had started the drive from LA to Anaheim along the brand new 5 freeway. When he was only minutes from the park, he hit traffic. His heart skipped a beat as he wondered if there was freeway construction preventing people from getting to Disneyland. He made his way through the traffic. All the while, he worried that Walt's gamble on the park would cause the company they started 27 years earlier to go under and render their families homeless. As Roy exited onto Harbor Boulevard, he realized there was no freeway construction. The entire 7 miles of traffic he endured were for people waiting to park their cars at Disneyland. People were lined up at the front gates in the summer heat. Reporters were taking down notes with excited smiles on their faces, and happy children bounced with glee as they waited to see the magical kingdom within. Roy saw a panic-stricken parking lot manager and asked what was wrong. The manager explained that several buses of school kids had arrived after being stuck in traffic, and now all the boys were getting out and peeing in the parking lot. Roy himself was just so relieved that everyone showed up, he simply laughed and told the parking lot manager, "God bless them, let them pee." Walt had gotten cleaned up and dressed before the Mouseketeers arrived at his apartment to see the first guests streaming into Disneyland. Mouseketeer Sharon Baird recalled, "I was standing next to him at the window, watching the guests come pouring through the gates. When I looked up at him, he had his hands behind his back, a grin from ear to ear. I could see a lump in his throat and a tear streaming down his cheek. He had realized his dream." To host the live telecast, Walt asked Art Linkletter, who in turn asked his friends Bob Cummings and Ronald Reagan to be his co-hosts. Cables were strewn all over the park to connect the cameras with the temporary command center. Some cables were strung between buildings, some lay in the middle of walkways, and others were held up high in the air as construction cranes hoisted makeshift filming platforms to capture aerial views of Disneyland. The July heat reached 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Dry ice had to be fed into the cameras to keep them from overheating. Women's high heels were sinking into the asphalt, which in some areas had only just been poured earlier that morning. Actors missed their cues, and thirsty parkgoers felt strong-armed into buying Pepsi and Coke products since a plumber's strike resulted in a lack of drinking fountains. No maximum capacity was established for the Mark Twain riverboat, which at one point filled with over 500 passengers, and as the boat rounded the bend in the river, water flowed over its lower deck. While Walt was being shuffled off from location to location for the telecast, more problems arose. Garbage was piling up backstage because the trucks never came to pick it up. Toilets at Adventureland overflowed. The park became uncomfortably overcrowded because although 11,000 invitations were issued, a flaw in the design allowed each guest to bring dozens of additional attendees. Other tickets were counterfeited and sold on the streets. In all, the park was packed with 28,000 people, which exceeded the capacity of Disneyland by 10,000. One man stood by the park fence with his ladder and charged a visit to climb into the park. Soon, the food was running out. Autopia cars were breaking down, and there was a gas leak in Fantasyland that forced the closure of the rides for the rest of the day. This came as a relief to people who witnessed parents hoisting their children over the carousel barrier so they could get on the ride despite the long wait. The disasters kept mounting, and it all happened while Walt was being kept oblivious to the problems. By the end of the day, he was finally informed of all that had happened, and he was furious to say the least. He yelled and hollered for his Imagineers to repair the park and get it operating again in time for the public opening the next day. Despite the bad publicity and the press nicknaming the park's opening as Black Sunday, a name which Walt hated, the park continued to draw in hordes of visitors every day that summer. The public could see that Disneyland was a place like no other on Earth. Average working-class people were able to experience a cruise through the exotic jungles of the world, take a romantic journey aboard an authentic stern-wheeled steam riverboat, fly over London as Peter Pan, or even hear the sharp cry of a steam whistle as an 1800s locomotive hauled happy visitors around the Magic Kingdom. Disneyland was a success, and just 55 days after opening, its 1 millionth visitor passed through its turnstiles. That number today is closer to 800 million. When people wonder why Disneyland being styled as a theme park made it more successful than any other amusement park in the world, the answer is best referred to a quote by J.G. O'Boyle. A theme park without rides is still a theme park. An amusement park without rides is a parking lot with popcorn. Walt's Little Park in Anaheim would become a quintessential part of Americana. Celebrities and heads of state from all over the world would visit Disneyland over the years. People don't just come because it has rides and characters, but because it was a way for people to escape their woes, if only for a day. Make no mistake, Southern California of the 1950s was not sleep from racism or segregation. This made it all the more poignant that Disneyland did not discriminate, and people of all races were welcomed. Evangelist Billy Graham was given a tour through Disneyland by Walt Disney himself. He asked Billy what he thought about the park being a place that brings people together, and Graham responded with what he thought was a compliment. "I think it's a wonderful fantasy world you've created here." This did not sit well with Walt, and he fired back, saying, "Billy, look around you. Look at all the people, all nationalities, all languages, all smiling, all having fun together. This is the real world. The fantasy is out there, outside the park gates, where people have hatreds and prejudices. It's not real." Over the years, Walt would continue to change and add to the park. He was never satisfied with the status quo. He felt that there should always be a new reason for people to come, and new things for them to experience. He referred to Disneyland as his block of clay, which he could continuously keep sculpting and shaping to fit the image he wanted.
Well, Walt once said to me, "I dream that one day nobody shows up. That's my nightmare." He knew that the show had to be fresh, that there had to be a new reason to come back.
The first major park expansion happened in 1958 when the Disneyland Railroad received a station in Tomorrowland and a brand new finale to the Grand Circle tour of the park, with the addition of the Grand Canyon Diorama. In 1959, the park held a grand reopening when new Fantasyland attractions were advertised along with 3 major e-ticket Tomorrowland attractions: the Matterhorn Bobsleds, the world's first tubular steel roller coaster, the Submarine Voyage, the 8th largest submarine fleet in the world at the time, and the Disneyland Alweg monorail, the first daily operating monorail system in the Western Hemisphere. Increasing Disneyland's profit margins was not high on Walt's priorities. He often ran the park at great expense for the sake of a flawless experience. He did not see the visitors with dollar signs in his eyes. He saw them as his guests. This is evident in a situation witnessed by Imagineer Rolly Crump. Walt was in a meeting with several park managers, and in that meeting, the director of merchandise suggested installing t-shirt stands around the park to entice visitors into spending more money. Walt didn't like the idea. Later, the man brought up the subject again, and Walt refused him again. Frustrated and trying to make a point about increasing profitability, the man rebuffed his argument for a 3rd time. Walt cut him off, and though everyone in the company was on a first-name basis, Walt used the man's last name for emphasis. "Mr. Becker, the tail does not wag the dog." And that was that.
Just as we had to learn to make our animated cartoons talk, we had to find a way to make these characters talk too. Now, to accomplish this, we created a new type of animation. So new that we had to invent a new name for it.
Audio animatronics?
Right, audio animatronics.
In 1962, Walt had an idea for creating a Polynesian-themed tiki room, complete with mechanical birds in cages. This idea morphed into Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, the world's first attraction to feature audio animatronics. This breakthrough in space-age technology allowed for WED Enterprises to participate in the 1964 New York World's Fair, where they created attractions like Ford's Magic Skyway, It's a Small World, the Carousel of Progress, and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. After the fair ended, Walt Disney had each attraction shipped back to Anaheim. The Carousel of Progress awaited a major Tomorrowland expansion. Mr. Lincoln gave speeches in the Main Street Opera House. The dinosaurs from Ford's Magic Skyway became the Primeval World diorama along the Disneyland Railroad. And last, but certainly not least, Walt Disney truly believed in the message of kindness and togetherness that It's a Small World delivered, and he enshrined the attraction with a magnificent and grand facade to make it stand out. On July 24th, 1966, Walt Disney attended his last grand opening ceremony at Disneyland for his much-anticipated New Orleans Square, a land that would encapsulate the charm and elegance of the New Orleans French Quarter. Not only that, but the new area of the park would be home to two highly anticipated attractions. Ever since 1957, Walt had wanted a haunted house in his park, and work was finally underway to develop it. Over by Adventureland, New Orleans Square would house a massive pirate-themed adventure created by his Imagineers Claude Coates and Marc Davis. It was late that year, 1966, when Walt's older brother Roy, who was now 73 years old, had expressed that he wanted to retire. However, Walt had a lot of projects up in the air. Chief among them was his plan for a massive theme park and futuristic city in Florida. The company had purchased 47,000 acres, twice the size of the island of Manhattan, and Walt was going to forever seal his legacy in this experimental prototype community of tomorrow.
We call it Epcot. Spelled E-P-C-O-T.
Walt admitted that he felt exhausted and gimpy himself, but he promised that as soon as they completed Disney World, they would both retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. It turned out that Walt's exhaustion was the result of something much worse. In October of that year, Walt had X-ray photos taken of his old polo injury, and in those photos, his doctors had discovered a lump in his left lung the size of a leaf. They took him to surgery to remove it, and he was able to return to work, but he knew he wasn't feeling the same. Imagineer Marc Davis could hear Walt coming down the hallway into his office to check on the progress of Pirates of the Caribbean. Marc recalled, his eyes were sunken and his appearance was gaunt. He listened to me give him the rundown, and after I was done, he said, "That's good." And as usual, he began to stroll out of my office. He usually would leave with a cheery wave and say, "See you later." But this time, he stopped at the doorway. He turned to look at me and he said, "Goodbye, Marc." And then he left. I was shocked because he never used to say goodbye. It was always "see you later." That was the last time I ever saw him. Walt had to return to the hospital in late November. He grew weaker and deteriorated to the point where he couldn't even celebrate his 65th birthday on December 5th. Things began to look up for a moment. His wife Lillian visited him on December 14th and phoned Roy, saying that Walt was feeling better. Roy visited Walt that night, and they ended up discussing the Disney World project. Walt feebly pointed up to the ceiling tiles, using them to reference the placement of various landmarks. Roy went home that night, happy to report to his wife Edna that Walt was improving. The next morning, December 15th, 1966, Walt Disney died. He was 65 years old. The family was informed of his passing, and Roy was the first family member on the scene. Walt's wife Lillian and their two daughters, Diane and Sharon, rushed to the hospital. Diane explained, "My mother went to enter the room, and she stopped at the doorway, holding her hands up in shock. I went in and found Dad laying peacefully in bed. My Uncle Roy was sitting at the foot of the bed, massaging Dad's feet. I think he said something like, 'Well, kid, I guess this is goodbye.' Everyone was in shock." Roy had returned to the studio later that day. He sat on the couch in his office and poured himself a drink. He reminisced to himself about his brother and their life together. But as his mind wandered back to the present, he realized that things weren't over. He thought about the company and all the projects currently in the works. Walt's final dreams were now on the line. He thought about the thousands of sad and confused employees of the company, who would soon be driven into chaos if he had left them. What would happen to the company? What would happen to their jobs? He sat down at his desk to write out a memo to everyone in the company, assuring them that everything would continue on as Walt had guided it. Roy Disney declared at that moment he would postpone his retirement to oversee the completion of all the projects left behind, finishing with Walt's greatest ambition, the Florida project that he called Disney World. Amidst their mourning and their tears, the Imagineers pulled together to complete Pirates of the Caribbean in 1967. The attraction was so successful that it helped the park to quickly recover from its drop in attendance after Walt's death. Imagineer Alice Davis recalled, "Pirates of the Caribbean literally saved Disneyland." Richard Irvine, the head of Imagineering, was so impressed with Mark Davis and Claude Coates' work on Pirates that he put them in charge of Haunted Mansion. And once again, they created a wildly successful attraction, debuting in 1969. The mansion was something that Walt would have been proud of. Also in 1967, the new Tomorrowland opened, featuring the Carousel of Progress, Adventure Through Inner Space, and the Wedway People Mover. That same year, work began on the Florida project, with Roy Disney himself at the helm. Roy had always been somewhat behind the scenes at the company. He ran the organization for his little brother and helped to make sure his dreams were financed. But now Roy found himself in a more creative role. It wasn't a position that came naturally for him, delegating tasks to Imagineers and overseeing creative development. But people around him said he truly shined in that moment. Walt's ideas for Epcot were not fully fleshed out, and so the company could not work on building his experimental community. Instead, Roy focused on building the theme park resort complex, plugging in ideas of his own, like replacing the plaza out front of the theme park with the massive 200-acre man-made Seven Seas Lagoon, which would give people good reason to ride the monorail or take a ferry boat to the main gates, adding to the sense of adventure. During one of the various meetings about the resort, Roy Disney announced that he was changing the name of Disney World to Walt Disney World, stating, "Everybody knows the Ford car, but not everybody knows it was Henry Ford who started it all. It's going to be Walt Disney World, so people will always know that this was Walt's dream." The opening day of the resort was fast approaching, and much like Disneyland's opening almost 2 decades earlier, Roy was told not everything would be complete. Roy had once asked Walt to delay the opening of Disneyland, and now executives were asking Roy to delay the opening of Walt Disney World. But he pointed up to the banner on Main Street Station, which read, "Remember, opening October 1971. Roy told everyone that he intended to keep that promise. When Walt had originally announced the Disney World project, Roy immediately supported it, which made another executive question Roy's sanity. Roy responded, "I had tuberculosis, and our finances were at worst ebb. My brother plucked us out of poverty and made me a millionaire. And you wonder why I would do anything I can to help him?"
And most of our arguments and disagreements, I think, have been because Roy has felt that he had to protect.
Though Walt had opened Disneyland in 1955 at a debt of $10 million, Roy opened Walt Disney World at a cost of $400 million, and the company was without any outstanding debt. Imagineer John Hench recalled the opening day. Roy Disney stood facing the microphone before a crowd of guests ready to deliver the dedication speech at the opening ceremony. He suddenly turned and looked around, and I heard him say quietly, "Somebody go find Mickey for me. We don't have Walt anymore, and Mickey is the nearest thing to Walt that we have left." Mickey appeared, and Roy promptly began his speech with Mickey standing proudly at his side.
"Hello, Mickey Mouse."
Indeed, Mickey understood the gravity of his presence at that moment, and instead of happily waving at guests and jumping excitedly, he stood respectfully, hands folded.
Walt Disney World is a tribute to the philosophy and the life of Walter Elias Disney.
Roy Disney had accomplished the impossible. Despite his advanced age, he took up the mantle and gave it everything he had left, and never quit. In doing so, he had honored the memory and legacy of his brother. It was a grand gesture of thanks for all the success and love that Walt had brought to Roy's life. He went home to California and intended to gradually retire from the company and leave it in the hands of Walt's most capable leaders. Roy's wife and son returned home one evening to find him lying on the floor in a daze. An ambulance took him to the hospital, where Roy Oliver Disney died the next day, December 20th, 1971, of an intracranial hemorrhage, just 2 months after opening Walt Disney World. He was 78 years old. Walt and Roy started with nothing, and over the course of 48 years, they built an empire dedicated not only to pushing the boundary of creativity, but also to give the world a way to spend a wholesome time together. Walt Disney never saw the completion of Walt Disney World, but his legacy and spirit live on at his original Magic Kingdom of Disneyland. It was often said that everything Walt did had turned to gold. Not only were his ideas lucrative, but people developed a deep emotional attachment to his various projects. Imagineer Rolly Crump said it best.
You see, this was Walt's secret. He touched everybody with everything that he did.
Walt Disney created Disneyland because he strongly felt there should be a place where parents and children could have fun together. It was a magical kingdom where you could travel the world through time and fantasy, joined by your favorite characters on exciting adventures, built all those years ago by the man who made us all believe that when you wish upon a star, your dreams can come true. Because at least they did for him.
And there you have it, folks. Probably about time to go to sleep. I am using a different type of wood on the inside because we can. I think it's called
On July
birch.
17, 1955, in the city of Anaheim, California, a magical, fantastical theme park known as Disneyland would have its official opening day. The opening day festivities would also be televised, with reports ranging from an estimated and unprecedented 70 to 90 million viewers watching as Mr. Walter Elias Disney brought his dreams to fruition. From opening day to the present, Disneyland has strived to bring families and the many tourists who visit each year a fun, magical experience, and through its iconic classic attractions to new, innovative technology, one can say that Disney is just getting warmed up. But how did Mr. Disney imagine such a place? And what would it take for him to get it up and running? For those answers and more, we'll take a trip back in time, explore the foundations of a dream turned reality, and how Walt Disney built his theme park kingdom known as Disneyland. It's all here on this episode of Bry Adventures, the history of Disneyland. Hi, I'm Brian Armand, and like you, I enjoy a good adventure, fun, fantastic, and magical journeys await. So sit back as I take a new excursion forward on this episode of Ride Adventures. Disneyland has a very in-depth history. As a park which would find itself over the years consistently adding new rides, attractions, shows, and the like, the amount of details that reside in its history are plentiful. As we move forward into this history of Disneyland, we'll take a look at some of its historic highlights throughout the years and focus on some of its iconic attractions and lands that the park debuted back in 1955. We'll also briefly touch upon additional attractions that made their way into Disneyland several years after the park opened. However, before venturing into that, we'll take a look at the man who once had a vision for this most magical place on earth and the happiest place on earth. The man whose name is, in fact, Disney, Walt Disney. Who was Walter Elias Disney? For that, we take a brief look into Walt's early life, including his major theme park. On December 5th, 1901, Walter Elias Disney was born in Chicago, Illinois. Several years later, in 1906, his family moved to farmland in Marceline, Missouri. It was there that Walt became interested in drawing, and his fascination for trains also started around this time. Years later, when the Disney family moved to Kansas City, Missouri, Walt became friends with a classmate who introduced him to the world of movies, and Walt's interest started to grow. Walt and his family moved back to Chicago for a brief time, where Walt became a cartoonist for his high school newspaper. In 1919, Walt moved back to Kansas City, and it was there that he met with Booth Iwerks. Both Iwerks and Disney were artists for a commercial art studio. Disney and Iwerks decided to venture into animation together, and Iwerks would become Disney's head animator. The first couple of years of the 1920s saw Walt's first professional animation studio. The Laugh-O-Gram Film Studios was born on the second floor of the McConaughey Building in Kansas City, Missouri. Walt's interest in fairy tales really started to take off during the short time he was at Laugh-O-Gram. And with that, Disney, along with Iwerks and several other animators, Laugh-O-Gram started producing animation films. It's said that Walt's earliest inspiration for Mickey Mouse came from a timid, stray mouse he would see around the desk while he was at Laugh-O-Gram. In 1923, Laugh-O-Gram filed for bankruptcy, and Walt, falling on hard times, decided to make the move to Hollywood. He would arrive in LA in August of that same year, 1923. His brother Roy had been in LA for treatment of an illness, and Walt's uncle had also resided there as well. It would be here, in Los Angeles, where Walt and Roy would together start Disney Brothers Studios. Initially, Walt and Roy started in this shed garage on the side of his Uncle Robert's house. Walt and Roy set up shop and went to work on ideas right away. However, that wouldn't last long, and in October of 1923, Walt found a small office space for rent that he and his brother could work out of. It was only a couple of blocks down the road on Kingswell Avenue from where he was staying at his uncle's house. The new location, Disney Brothers Studios, would be where they worked on films, and in 1924, Disney contacted Iwerks to come out to Hollywood. On July 13, 1925, Walt Disney married Lillian Bounds. She was working as a secretary for Disney Brothers Studios at the time. In 1926, Walt Disney's first studio in Hollywood was established. It was a full-on studio and much bigger than the Kingswell Avenue location, located on Hyperion Avenue. On a side note, this would be around the time to where Mickey Mouse, as we know him, was born. In 1927, Disney and Iwerks created a character known as Oswald the Lucky Rabbit for Universal Pictures. They wanted a rabbit type of cartoon character, as cats were used quite commonly around that time. The character Oswald was featured in Universal's short Trolley Troubles. Oswald became a major hit for Universal and went up against other shorts such as Felix the Cat. Later on, Walt would discover that Universal owned the intellectual property rights to the character Oswald. This prompted Disney and Iwerks to create a character of their own, Mickey Mouse. Originally named Mortimer Mouse, it was Disney's wife Lillian who thought the name Mickey to be more appropriate. Mickey's first appearance would be in the 1928 animation release Steamboat Willie, along with Minnie Mouse. Although several months earlier, both Mickey and Minnie were featured in a test screening animation short entitled Plain Crazy. Disney had sketched Mickey, and Iwerks would then revise the character for animation. Fun fact, Walt Disney would go on to provide Mickey's voice until 1947.
Yeah, me, I guess.
Walt wanted to do something different. He wanted to stand out amongst the rest. While cartoon shorts of the time were silent, Walt conjured up the idea to create a full feature-length animated production with sound. Walt was an innovator. He thrived at utilizing advanced technology, and it was his goal to make it all happen, to which it did. In 1934, Disney went from producing animated shorts to the more profitable full-length animation features. Walt and his Disney company began work on the fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It became the first animated feature in full color and sound, topping off at $1.5 million, which was way off its initial budget. They made use of the multiplane camera, which allowed for a great three-dimensional effect.
So we have hurriedly thrown together a little film that we hope will give you some idea of the methods involved and the great amount of work involved in the production of these pictures. This is the fundamental principle behind the making of animated motion pictures at the Walt Disney Studios today. First step in the complex process is to create an interesting story. Sketchmen are then called in to make rough drawings. These drawings, after much trial and error, are tacked up on storyboards in sequence. The story then moves into a conference room, where Walt Disney comes in to look it over. For Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Walt is spending most of his time in spirited meetings
Snow White debuted in 1937 and by 1938 became the most successful motion picture of its time.
Picture that every newspaper and magazine critic is raving about. Snow White is as exciting as a Western, as funny as a haywire comedy. It combines the classic idiom of folklore drama with rollicking comic strip humor. It is an authentic masterpiece.
Walt and his team would soon outgrow the Hyperion Avenue studio location, and construction on a more elaborate studio over in Burbank was in the works. In January of 1940, construction at the studio's new location was complete, and Walt and his team made the move over to his new Burbank location. They were moved in and ready to go by May of that very same year, in 1940. It's said that even some of the structures from the Hyperion Avenue location made their way onto the new studio lot in Burbank. On a side note, in 1966, what was left of Walt's old Hyperion Avenue studio was demolished, and a new supermarket was built in its place on this historic site. Now, with a more robust studio space in place, Walt and his team moved onward. Walt and his Disney animation team would continue to produce other famous animated films such as Pinocchio and Fantasia, just to name some. 1950 became the year that Cinderella would be released. It would be Disney's first animated feature in 8 years. At the time, Disney was also working on its first live-action feature entitled Treasure Island. Other animated features would follow, with Alice in Wonderland in 1951 and Peter Pan in 1953.
I think I'll start mouthing the words. Ready, set, go.
As the 1950s moved along, Walt set his interest on other ventures, and although he was still in the loop of everything, his involvement in animation was less, and he left most of that work to his team of talented animators. This time away gave Walt some great ideas as well. Walt also began his own distribution, Buena Vista. Walt had an idea in his mind for quite a while about a place where families could go and spend time in a safe, clean, friendly environment, where people of all ages could be transported into a magical world that featured both educational and amusement values. Walt had this idea while watching his daughters have a fun time on the carousel in Griffith Park in LA.
And I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, eating peanuts. I felt that there should be something there, some kind of an amusement enterprise field where the parents and the children could have fun together. So that's how Disneyland started. Well, it took many years. It was a whole period of maybe 15 years developing. I started with many ideas, threw them away, started all over again. Eventually it evolved into what you see today as Disneyland. But it all started from a daddy with 2 daughters wondering where he could take them, where he could have a little fun with them too.
This wasn't just an idea Walt had. However, it was a grand vision of many things he had either seen or experienced in his life leading up to this point. Walt Studios in Burbank was a place that had many people interested in visiting. However, in Walt's mind, he felt that the movie studios alone would not provide any significant entertainment value. So he imagined a small park referred to as the Mickey Mouse Park that would have a couple of small themed areas, including a boat ride. He envisioned this concept on a small piece of land that sat opposite of his studios in Burbank, and in 1952, he was granted zoning permissions to build. Over the years, Walt had traveled to many other themed attractions, and he was heavily inspired on what he saw and experienced. Walt formed WED Enterprises, which eventually became Walt Disney Imagineering, and he put his Imagineers to work right away. As his designers worked on research for the new park, they eventually realized that their concept needed a much bigger parcel of land, and the land across from Walt's Burbank studios would be too small to implement a lot of their ideas. Walt set out to find a bigger piece of land and eventually purchased 160 acres in Anaheim, a city in Orange County, California, about 35 miles away from his Burbank studios. Funding for the larger park became an issue, and Mr. Disney decided to shop around an idea to fund the project by producing a recurring program entitled Disneyland, eventually known as The Wonderful World of Disney. The TV program would highlight and preview the new up-and-coming park and what it had to offer, including some of its various lands. The network, ABC, picked it up, and Disney and ABC became involved in the project. This was the beginning of Disney's relationship with the ABC network. With funding in place, construction on Disneyland began on July 16, 1954. All the concepts and designs were now all coming to fruition, and Mr. Walt Disney would watch his land come to life.
On the site of 240 acres near the city of Anaheim in Southern California, right about in here, we've begun to build Disneyland the place. We hope that it will be unlike anything else on this earth. Fair, amusement park, an exhibition, a city from the Arabian Nights, metropolis from the future. In fact, a place of hopes and dreams, facts and fancy, all in one. Now, next year, our television show will be coming from this Disneyland. But this year, we want you to see and share with us the experience of building this dream into a reality.
On Sunday, July 17, 1955, just 1 year and 1 day later from the initial start of construction, Disneyland had its grand opening. The cost of the project, $17 million. All of Mr. Disney's designers' hard work and dedication would now hopefully pay off, and that one vision he had of his own daughters having fun on a carousel in Griffith Park would now be put to the test, and the day for it was finally here. For families of all ages from all over could now come and make their own fun memories.
And now, Walt Disney will step forward to read the dedication of Disneyland.
All who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world. Thank you.
This afternoon, Disneyland, the world's most fabulous kingdom, will be unveiled before an invitational world premiere, and you are guests. Art Linkletter will be your host, and with ABC crews and cameras on the spot, will guide you through this truly magic land. And to start the proceedings, we take you to the entrance of Disneyland and your host, Art Linkletter.
That's not Art Linkletter. That's Mickey Mouse, the inimitable little character that started this whole story with Walt Disney 25 years ago. Perhaps the most popular motion picture star in Hollywood.
Opening day was to be reserved for the media and invited guests only. However, the next day Disney opened to the public. Opening day saw around 28,000 people, although only 11,000 were expected. The park opened with over 30 attractions and 5 themed areas: Main Street USA, Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrow. Main Street USA was at the entrance of Disneyland, set as an early 20th century Midwest town. A lot of inspiration for the look of it came from Walt's hometown of Marceline, Missouri. Here, one would find a train station, firehouse, town square, movie theater, city hall, and various shops and other small town atmosphere, all with a touch of Disney magic. Main Street USA's train station housed a train that would encircle the park. Walt's great love of trains since he was young played an important role at the park. In fact, Walt himself had a rideable miniature backyard train in his Holmby Hills estate known as the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad. He named his real steam locomotive the Lily Bell, after his wife Lillian.
I decided my locomotive would be modeled after a Central Pacific locomotive that was built in Sacramento in the year 1872.
This would also inspire him to create a full-size version within Disneyland. The train was also an opening day attraction. However, throughout the years, several changes, implementations, and such have been added to complement its route throughout the park. At the end of Main Street is the iconic Sleeping Beauty's castle, which stands 77 feet tall. Walt's idea for using a technique called forced perspective allows for the castle to appear much taller. This technique was also used throughout the Main Street USA area, particularly on the upper floors of the shops that line the streets. This technique gives the illusion of something being much taller or bigger than it really is, from the perspective of the individual who's viewing it. Making our way to the next themed area, we find ourselves in Adventureland. Adventureland recreates an exotic tropical atmosphere.
Let's join the crowd and share with them in the fun of a true life adventure in Adventureland as it is today. As we enter the gates of this tropical settlement, we leave the everyday world far behind. For here, the atmosphere is filled with the sights and sounds typical of an isolated trading post on some hidden jungle waterway.
Walt envisioned a lush jungle-like setting far away from civilization, where animals roam, and one of the original opening day star attractions was the Jungle Cruise. The Jungle Cruise takes park guests on a replica-style steam riverboat adventure, traversing through various waterways throughout a rainforest, jungle-like setting, as guests listen to the boat skipper's narration while they look at various scenes filled with animatronics along the way.
Welcome aboard the Zambezi Best. Now, we leave the international dock, the last outpost of civilization, and glide into the upper reaches of the Amazon. Immediately ahead of the boat, on the right-hand side, we're approaching them now, there are 3 charging alligators. Now watch your hands, please, watch the hands. Last week, 2 of them broke their leashes, gouged a terrific hole at the side of a wet boat. Of course, to stock Adventureland with live animals was neither safe nor practical. So on paper, we began to sketch and design replicas that would be made of plastic and steel, but when in action, would be as lifelike as their real counterparts. The electrical wizards get their biggest shock when they find that everything works.
There are various animatronics representing specific animals known to live within the recreated settings. Imagineer Bill Evans, who was responsible for Disneyland's landscaping, went to work on landscape design for this attraction. Walt wanted this attraction to be as lifelike as possible, right down to having real live animals. Eventually realizing that live animals within the attraction would not be feasible, Walt still wanted a lifelike feel to the ride, and the landscaping, among other things along the ride's pathway, definitely delivered upon Walt's vision. The comedic narration that would become famous at the Jungle Cruise wasn't always that way. As Walt's vision was a realistic adventure, the narration spiel was more like narration found within a nature documentary. Like with many rides and attractions at Disneyland, the Jungle Cruise also went through many various changes and upgrades throughout the years. Not all Disneyland's now classic attractions opened with the park back on opening day in 1955, and this was also the case in various other areas and lands within the park. Other themed attractions that followed years later were Swiss Family Treehouse and the Enchanted Tiki Room. The Enchanted Tiki Room, which opened on June 23, 1963, was somewhat of a technology marvel, and in fact was Walt's first attraction to employ audio animatronics. These animatronics were computer-controlled, and they synced sound to the robotic movements. Together, you get a more realistic, lifelike animatronic, and in the case of the Tiki Room, they were these exotic, lifelike birds.
You know, the same scientific equipment that guides rockets to the moon is used to make Jose and his little friends in the Tiki Room sing, talk, move, and practically think for themselves. I guess you could call him a creature of the space age.
Steeped in Tiki culture, this Polynesian-themed attraction, or room as it's called, treats guests to a unique Polynesian experience. Originally, the idea for the Tiki Room was for it to be a restaurant where guests would be serenaded by the tropical audio animatronic birds above. A fun fact about the interior of the Tiki Room: at the center of the room resides the Magic Fountain. It was originally planned to be a coffee station for the original proposed idea for a restaurant. 4 lifelike animatronic birds host the show. They are parrot-like birds, each with their own specific name. The show has signature songs by Walt's music team, the Sherman Brothers, and its unique presentation along the way give guests a lifelike Polynesian experience. Heading over to Frontierland, Walt's vision here was to recreate the pioneer days of the American frontier. Walt wanted his guests to experience what it was like to live within the country's early days, documenting its history, and that allowed for some great attractions for guests to enjoy. One attraction was the Mark Twain Riverboat, which resided on the Rivers of America, one of Walt's man-made rivers. Both the Rivers of America and the Mark Twain Riverboat were opening day attractions. Sailing ship Columbia was another attraction to join the Mark Twain on the Rivers of America several years later. The Golden Horseshoe Saloon was also opened with the park on July 17, 1955. However, it had also unofficially opened for Walt and his wife Lillian 4 days earlier on July 13 to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary.
Your attention, please. Will Walt Disney's special guests please go to the Golden Horseshoe in Frontierland? Golden Horseshoe Review here in Frontierland in Disneyland.
Corporate sponsors also got to experience the saloon prior to opening day on July 16, 1955. Over the years, the saloon played host to various stage shows. 1 year after Disneyland's opening in 1956, Tom Sawyer Island opened. It was an artificial island surrounded by the Rivers of America. Opening on July 2nd, 1956, was Rainbow Caverns Mine Train. On June 12, 1960, the Mine Train through Nature's Wonderland opened. It was an extension to the already existing Mine Train attraction from 1956. It featured audio animatronic animals in both desert and wooded themed areas. Mine Train through Nature's Wonderland closed on January 2nd, 1977, as construction for a new ride, Big Thunder Mountain, was ready to get underway.
Force has unleashed the runaway mine trains. Big Thunder Mountain, but every day, Big Thunder strikes. Big Thunder strikes. At Disneyland.
Big Thunder Mountain would open at the park in 1979. It was in part inspired by Bryce Canyon National Park in southwestern Utah. Splash Mountain, which opened on July 17, 1989, was located in the area of the park named Critter Country. Critter Country was originally named Bear Country when the area first opened back on March 4, 1972, and its main attraction was the Country Bear Jamboree. Walt Disney World in Florida debuted the Country Bears attraction in 1971, and its wide popularity allowed for Disneyland's version to be built. Thus, the name Bear Country was implemented to accommodate the new show. Bear Country was later renamed Critter Country in 1988 to prepare for the opening of Splash Mountain. In 2023, Splash Mountain closed in both Walt Disney World and Disneyland to make way for a new adventure, Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which was themed to the 2009 animated film, The Princess and the Frog. Fantasyland was one of Walt's most fantastical areas of the park. Guests could fly with Peter Pan on Peter Pan's Flight, a suspended rail dark ride which took guests on a magical adventure, or have a go-around on King Arthur's Carousel. The carousel, built in 1922, was brought to Disneyland from Sunnyside Beach Park in Canada, refurbished, and was one of Fantasyland's opening day attractions. Another attraction to open with the park was the widely popular Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Fantasyland's theming was of a Renaissance fair when it first debuted in 1955. It had stayed so for several decades until 1983, when a reimagination of the land was put forth. The reason for these changes within Fantasyland came from the tight quarters of its original design. Rides were too close to one another, leaving walkways congested at times, and the 1983 redesign of the land addressed those issues along with new attractions as well. The Renaissance theming would also receive a makeover to a Bavarian-themed village. On June 14, 1958, a new attraction, Alice in Wonderland, had debuted in Fantasyland. The ride was based on the 1951 Disney animated film, which carried the same name. Tomorrowland would round out the 5 original lands opening with the park back on July 17, 1955. This land would focus on the future, and its original theme was heavily influenced on the space age. The design of this area of the park saw technical consulting from real rocket scientists for a more realistic approach to what guests would experience.
Good night, everybody. Got too tired.
Rocket to the Moon,
I totally love you. I exercise you. Wow.
This was in 1955. Disney itself would continue to build upon its opening day attraction.